Good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year to everyone. I'm Richard Brown, and this is the DMV NFL Show. We're coming to you live from Tacoma Park, Maryland. And we're going to talk about the hottest topics of the NFL this week. First, we're going to start about Chip Kelly being fired by the Eagles. They missed the playoffs for the second year in a row. Probably will finish 7-9 or 6-10. He was fired with one more game left in the season, and offensive coordinator Pat Shurmur is going to take over as the interim head coach when they face the Giants tomorrow. Ed Marinowitz, who is one of Chip Kelly's hand-picked personnel guys, he was the vice president of player personnel. He was also fired. And Tim Donahue was promoted to senior director of player personnel, and Howie Roseman is now back as general manager. Chip Kelly will leave Philadelphia with a record of 26-21 with an 0-1 playoff record. And Jeffrey Lurie made this move because the Eagles underachieved this year. They were the consensus pick to win the NFC East, but the problem is they didn't have talent. And that's ultimately what led to Chip Kelly being fired. He let go of a lot of high-priced guys like Deshaun Jackson and Jeremy Maclin, who were studs. Deshaun Jackson doing well with the Redskins. Jeremy Maclin doing great with the playoff-bound Kansas City Chiefs. Evan Mathis is another guy. He's on the Denver Broncos. The trade for Kiko Alonso, trading LaShawn McCoy away, signing DeMarco Murray and Byron Maxwell. I mean, all these moves are what got Chip Kelly fired. And everyone in Philadelphia, along with myself, we're thinking, what are you doing? You have to win in this league with talent. And not having talent, I mean, that puts a lot of pressure on your team. And, what Jeffrey Lurie said in his press conference is he didn't even offer Chip Kelly a chance to give back his GM power. He just basically called him in his office and he said, see you later. So, one thing that Jeffrey Lurie, Jeffrey Lurie is an owner. I like Jeffrey Lurie. I like Jeffrey Lurie a lot. He's an offhands kind of guy. He lets the coach run the team. But, you look at the last two games. I mean, the blowout loss to Arizona. The attendees were headed for the parking lots in the third quarter. The game against the Redskins. And they've just been losing at home embarrassingly. And, Jeffrey Lurie had to be thinking to himself, what's going on with my team? And they haven't had a lot of head coaches since Jeffrey Lurie owned the team. They've had four, Rich Kotite, Ray Rhodes, Andy Reid, and now Chip Kelly. I think he just looked at the state of his team and he figured, he had to make this change. And, Jeffrey Lurie deserves some of the blame too for this. He gave Chip Kelly all this power. And, Chip Kelly did not deserve that kind of power. I mean, he was 10-6 his first 2 years, and that's a great accomplishment for a new head coach. But, you look at coaches that have this GM, head coaching power. Mike Shanahan got it in Washington and in Denver because he won Super Bowls and he won playoff games. Bill Belichick has it in New England because he has 4 Super Bowls, wins playoff games. Andy Reid had it because he won playoff games. Pete Carroll has won Super Bowls. One playoff appearance is not worthy to get you control. I don't know what Jeffrey Lurie was thinking, but, he's reaping exactly what he's been sowing. So, it'll be interesting to see who they want as the new head coach. But, some of these contracts that Chip Kelly, signed, they're going to be tough to get out from under. DeMarco Murray, the 5-year, $42 million contract. I didn't think that was a good signing because he played behind a great offensive line in Dallas. Darren McFadden, who's, almost, he's on the wrong side of his late 20s. He's about to crack 1,000 yards. I mean, I could run behind that line and get over 1,000 yards. DeMarco Murray was the product of a good system. And, I mean, I know they were misusing him. He's not the east and west runner. He's more of a, downhill runner, north and south. But, Chip just didn't want to use him that way. And, what really concerned me was when, DeMarco Murray went to Jeffrey Lurie and he was like, I'm not satisfied with my role in the offense. I don't think Chip Kelly's that great of a coach. I mean, it just shows the kind of player he was. So, I think that, with a new coach, maybe they'll be able to use him a little bit better. But, I mean, you can't cut him because it's going to cost him about $10 million. And then there's Byron Maxwell. I thought that was a stupid signing because when he was in Seattle, he was okay, I think the Eagles should have just kept Kerry Williams and Bradley Fletcher because they were better in the secondary last year than they were this year. Byron Maxwell was burned on 61.7% of, his pass plays when he was thrown in his direction. Last year, 57% in Seattle. I mean, he was burnt toast. He's playing like a number 3 corner. They signed him to a 6-year contract with $63 million. And that's another contract they're not going to be able to get under. Maybe changing a scheme might be able to bring more out of Byron Maxwell, but I don't know. I was never crazy about that signing. And then the trade for Sam Bradford. Nick Foles has since been benched in St. Louis. So St. Louis didn't get the quarterback that they were hoping to. But the Eagles gave up a second-round pick and Foles for Sam Bradford. I don't know why. I think Foles for Bradford would have been an even trade because, the Eagles had to pick up Sam Bradford's $13 million salary because the Rams went to Bradford and said, we need you to take a pay cut. And Bradford said no. And the Rams were like, see you later. So, Sam Bradford threw 3,400 yards, 17 touchdowns, 13 interceptions, completing 60% of his passes. I mean, he showed flashes, and he got hurt a couple games. That's the problem with Bradford. He never could stay healthy. And, I don't know if they're going to bring him back because, he really hasn't shown him anything, and there's going to be quarterbacks out there like, Robert Griffin III and Colin Kaepernick that I think could, execute the offense better than Sam Bradford. But it's going to, again, depend on who they bring in as their new head coach. So, overall, Chip Kelly signed his own death certificate with all these moves. He just thought he could win with his system without talent, and it didn't work. Now, Chip Kelly could get a new head coaching job, elsewhere. There's talks about the Tennessee Titans. He would reunite with Marcus Mariota, where they, won a lot of games at Oregon. But, again, is Chip Kelly going to be willing to be a head coach without control? And, I don't know if a team is willing to give Chip Kelly a shot, if he wants the control. If I was the Tennessee Titans and I hired him, I'd be like, you can be our coach, but we have a general manager. We're not going to let you pick the players because of what happened in Philadelphia. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I think most likely Chip Kelly is going to go back to college and find an opening there. So we'll see what happens. But I think another change that'll happen in Philadelphia is Billy Davis. I was never high on Billy Davis. I said it time in and time out. The guy can't coach a defense. Look at in Arizona, 2009. In a playoff game against the Green Bay Packers, they give up 45 points. And then, against the New Orleans Saints, 45 points. They started off strong that year, but they just fell off a cliff. 2010, they were terrible. And then, Ken Whisenhunt got rid of him, and they brought in Ray Horton. And I just never thought it was a good move because the guy is arrogant. He can't coach. Now, what'll be interesting to see is whoever the new head coach is, if they stick with the 3-4 or if they bring in a 4-3. And, a name to watch out for as a defensive coordinator candidate is Mike Pettin. I mean, there's reports out of Cleveland right now that he will most likely be fired. The guy can coach defense. He did a great job with the Jets. And in 2013 in Buffalo, Kiko Alonso did well. And, I think that would probably mesh well with some of the players they have. So, wouldn't be surprised if Mike Pettin was the new defensive coordinator there in Philadelphia. And as far as the Eagles search for a new head coach, there was a report that came out today that running backs coach Deuce Staley interviewed for the head coaching position. And I think most likely that was to honor the Rooney Rule. I don't know, but he's well respected within the organization, and Jeffrey Lurie said that he would look at people within the organization to interview, and everyone around the league thinks that he's a budding head coach candidate, and Deuce Staley can coach running backs. This year was a little bit of a not that great of a year, but Ryan Matthews did a great job, Darren Sproles did a great job. When he had LaShawn McCoy there and Brian Westbrook, they did a great job. So maybe he gets a coordinator position. But if he became the head coach, I wouldn't necessarily be surprised. Look at John Harbaugh. He was the special teams coach, and then he was the secondary coach, and Baltimore hired him. And look, they won a Super Bowl. So, I mean, it's not entirely out of the realm of possibilities. But, another hot candidate that's out there is Cincinnati Bengals offensive coordinator Hugh Jackson. He was 8-8 with 1 year with the Raiders, never understood why they got rid of him there. He did a great job, made him respectable, and it took him a couple of years, to get back to respectability now with Jack Del Rio and them. So, and then there's Adam Gase, who's the offensive coordinator in Chicago. He's a hot coaching candidate. He got interviewed with the 49ers last year, an interview with Denver. And then, one to look out for is Doug Marrone. He was the head coach in Buffalo, did a good job. He's the offensive line coach right now in Jacksonville. And if he went there, I could see him bringing Pettin because they worked together in Buffalo. Sean McDermott is the hot candidate because he has ties with ownership, and he's done a great job in Carolina. Chuck Pagano would be a great hire if the Indianapolis Colts decided to part with him. I think he would work better with Jeffrey Lurie and with Howie Roseman because, Jimmy Irsay doesn't know his ass from a hole in the ground. And, I don't know. about Ryan Grigson. I mean, some of the moves he's made, I mean, it's tough to work with. I like Chuck Pagano. I think if he got fired, I think that would be a great hire. Sean Payton, if he was let go by the Falcons, the New Orleans Saints. But one to look out for is Mike Smith. He was the head coach in Atlanta from 2008 to 2014. They were a 3-13 team when he took them over. Got them to 11-5 his first year, then 9-7. That was the first time they had back-to-back winning seasons. 13-3 in 2010, 10-6 2011, 13-3 in 2012. I think that some of the moves that Thomas Dimitroff, their general manager, made kind of hampered him. I think with Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie, I think Mike Smith would be an excellent hire. So we'll see what happens there. But when we return, we'll talk about the Redskins' hopes of advancing in the playoffs now that they're NFC division champions in the East. We will see you when we get back. All right, we're back, and now we're going to talk about the Redskins' hopes of advancing in the playoffs. I mean, first off, you got to give Jay Gruden and first-year general manager Scott McCloughan some credit. I mean, Scott McCloughan overhauled the roster, drafting Brandon Sheriff, and then you had Preston Smith and Matt Jones and Jamison Crowder and Ari Kawanjo and all those guys are being key contributors on the team. And then, bringing in guys like Chris Culver and Terrence Knight, and Deshaun Goldson. All these guys have really, been a big part in what has turned around the Redskins this season. I think Jay Gruden has done a great job this year, a lot better than what he did last year. I think having the support of the general manager was big. I picked them to win 10 games this year, but, a lot of sportscasters thought they would finish last. I think they'll probably finish 9-7 this year. But the big thing that concerns me with them advancing in the playoffs is they're 2-5 on the road. And a lot of the road losses have been against winning teams. The Redskins have not beaten teams with a winning record this year. The flip side of that argument is, they've been in some close games with winning teams, like with Carolina, going into halftime, they were neck and neck with them until, that phantom call, Chris Culver against, Greg Olsen, just kind of, they lost their poise and that game got broken open, Against the Jets, the first game, granted the Redskins were banged up, but, they were neck and neck with them until the wheels fell off them. Same with the game against the Patriots, and the game against the Falcons. They went down to the wire with them, I think that now that the Redskins are healthier this year and they're playing outstanding football on the offensive side of the ball, they've scored 72 points the last two games. And then that is really, really impressive. And another thing, you got to give Jay Gruden credit going with Kirk Cousins. I thought that Robert Griffin III was going to start, but, I was at the Detroit game when he got, the stuffing beat out of him, and he looked absolutely catastrophic. And so, Kirk Cousins came in, the offense looked smoother with them. It was a very gutsy decision because if it failed, Jay Gruden, for all intents and purposes, would probably be fired. And I think, Cousins has set so many franchise records for completions. If he breaks 4,000 yards, he'll break the record that was set by Brad Johnson back in 1999. And he's been outstanding this year, and you have to give him a lot of credit. And here's how it goes. I don't think Seattle's going to beat Arizona, but if Green Bay beats Minnesota, we will play Seattle. And we've lost to Seattle the last 3 times in the playoffs. But, this Seattle Seahawks team is not as strong as it's been in the past. I think we have a good chance to beat them. If we play Green Bay, they're fading. If they lose to Minnesota, we would play the Packers. The Redskins can beat the teams in the wild card. But, if they lost to them, I wouldn't be surprised because, they're good teams. But, if we advance into the divisional round of the playoffs, I really don't see us going much farther. Carolina's really, really good, but they're starting to slip a little bit, and I can't say enough about Arizona. They're playing great. I think the Redskins will be lucky if they get to the divisional round of the playoffs, but I still think it's been an outstanding season. I think Jay Gruden should be up for Coach of the Year. He's done a great job, and I think the Redskins have a lot to look forward to, from this point forward. So now we're going to get into, have the Ravens found their backup quarterback? And, Ryan Mallett, I was never really high on him, when the Ravens signed him because, of what happened in Houston. He showed up late to the flight to Miami when the Texans played the Dolphins, and he had to take a commercial flight, and he lied to coaching staff and said that, it was traffic, and there wasn't traffic. So, but the Ravens, gave minimal contract. Mallett has talent. He's got the arm, and he's accurate with the football when he wants to be. But, against the Steelers last week, he played exceptionally well. He was 28 for 41 for 274 and a touchdown with a quarterback rating of 95. And he had some great velocity on his throws. He stood tall in the pocket. He showed a lot of poise. And, and seeing the Ravens backups this year, he outperformed both the backups combined, But is he the long-term, backup solution to Joe Flacco? I don't know. The Steelers are one of the worst defenses in the league this year. 23rd overall and 30th against the pass. So, and the Steelers got beat by backup wide receivers. So, that just shows you how bad of a defense they are. But, we'll see what happens against the Bengals next week. I think Cincinnati's going to win that game. But if he plays well, then they'll be fine. He's better than what they had. Jimmy Clausen is absolutely pathetic. He's the model of ineptitude, and I was never high on him when he came out of Notre Dame, that he has that cocky, smug attitude of his. Matt Schaub has the experience, but he does one thing, throw pick sixes. So he'll probably be gone. And the one thing about Ryan Mallett, if he, comes off the bench, and if Flacco got banged up more, if Mallett came off the bench, performed well, they could trade Mallett and get draft picks. Ozzy's been known to do that. So, it's all going to depend on how he performs against Cincinnati, and we'll see if he's the long-term backup answer. Now, going on to Brock Osweiler. He played exceptionally well against the Cincinnati Bengals last week. That was a game the Denver Broncos had to win. And when Cincinnati went up 14-0, I thought the "we want Manning" chants were going to come out because, the last couple games, Osweiler hasn't played that well. The Raider game, I really don't blame him much for because Khalil Mack was in his face within 1 second. The Steelers game, though, he played great in the first half, but he was awful in the second half. So, he, after the first couple drives, he got something going, and he really responded. So, it looks like Peyton Manning's going to be the backup to Osweiler. So, I think that Osweiler's got the job for the rest of the season. I don't know if Denver's going to get very far in the playoffs, but we'll see what happens. But I think it's safe to say that Peyton Manning's tenure in Denver is about to come to a close. And speaking of Peyton Manning, we're also going to talk about the alleged HGH use at Al Jazeera America, the report that came out. And I've come to have growing respect for Al Jazeera over the years, but after seeing this report, I'm not sure because they've had to recant it, and, and Peyton Manning has denied HGH use. And, and after seeing this report, there were some interesting points that they had brought up. They asked Liam Collins, who was an ex-hurdler, and who was hired by Tim Montgomery, who was a sprinter who had been caught for doping, to write a book about him. And so, Al Jazeera had reached out to Liam Collins about going undercover. And, and I don't know how much I trust Liam Collins because he was a property developer in Great Britain, and he duped investors out of money that he couldn't repay. He ran some sort of a Ponzi scheme, and now he's been barred from doing business in Great Britain. So I don't know how much I trust him, and allegedly, he linked up with Chad Robertson, who was a dope dealer in Vancouver, who claimed to, supply steroids to guys like Clay Matthews and Mike Neal, who both play for the Green Bay Packers. And, Al Jazeera reached out to them, and both, Mike Neal and Clay Matthews have denied, any knowledge of all this. And then, Liam met with Charlie Sly, who supposedly was a pharmacist at the Geyer Institute in Indianapolis back in 2011 when Peyton Manning was rehabbing from neck surgery. He claimed that, Peyton had gotten human growth hormone from him, and then, that he would send HGH to his wife in Florida, under false stuff and all that, And, and now the Geyer Institute has come out and said, well, Charlie Sly was an intern, and he didn't become a full pharmacist until 2 years later after Peyton Manning had left Indianapolis and went to the Denver Broncos. So, I just don't know much about this Charlie Sly. I don't know. I don't think he is telling the truth. And, and he recanted the report because, he exposed all these athletes, and Al Jazeera said that this report wasn't done by them. So, and if I was Peyton Manning, I would sue him for defamation. This is ridiculous. Peyton Manning, of all people, would not dope. He is the epitome of a hardworking athlete. He does everything legit. But, the flip side to this argument is, everybody thought that about Alex Rodriguez and Mark McGuire and Lyle Alzado. All those athletes did not using steroids, and now it came out that they did. So I'm going to wait for this thing to unfold. If, on the surface, Peyton Manning, to me, would not use HGH. But I'm going to wait and see what happens because history has taught me, be very careful. So we'll see what happens with that. All right, so now we're going to come into the segment of Dick's Picks. And the first one we're going to talk about is the New Orleans Saints at the Atlanta Falcons. I like Atlanta this game, coming off a huge upset win against Carolina. It's in Atlanta. The Saints defense, got shredded by Blake Bortles last week for over 300 yards. I think Matt Ryan and the Falcons do enough to win. And then there's the Jets and the Bills. I like the Jets this game because they're red hot right now. Just beat the Patriots. They're playing great defense right now. Buffalo has a porous defense. There's reports out there right now about players not buying into the system like Mario Williams. So I think the Jets win. Detroit at Chicago. I like the Bears. It's at Soldier Field. The Lions have had a hard time winning there the last couple of years, so I like the Bears. Baltimore at Cincinnati. I think this will be a close game, but I like what the Bengals have done. It depends if A.J. McCarron can go. I like the Bengals. And then there's Steelers at Cleveland. I don't think the Steelers are going to make the playoffs, but I like them this game. Cleveland, there's reports right now about Mike Pettin, being out, so I like the Steelers. And then Washington at Dallas. Looks like the Redskins are going to play their starters, but I think they'll probably pull them in the first half, but I think the game will be out of reach for Dallas. I think Redskins win that one going away. And then Jacksonville at Houston. I like the Texans this game, but I think it's going to be close because the Jaguars have one hell of a high-powered offense with Bortles and Allen Robinson and Allen Hurns and Julius Thomas. I think that there'll be points scored, but I think Houston does enough to win. Tennessee at Indianapolis. I like Tennessee this game, only because Indianapolis' quarterback situation's in flux. Both Matt Hasselbeck and Charlie Whitehurst are injured. They had to sign Ryan Lindley and Josh Freeman. Ryan Lindley played with the Cardinals last year, was absolutely terrible. Josh Freeman hasn't played it down in the NFL for 2 years, and last game he played was against Minnesota, and he was like 19 of 51 for barely 200 yards and 3 interceptions. He was terrible. So, I trust Zach Mettenberger over the quarterbacks the Colts have, so I like Tennessee that game. New England at Miami, I like the Patriots. Miami is just, in free fall right now. They're a laughable organization, and I like the Patriots. Eagles at the Giants, I like the Giants. I just don't think on a short week that Pat Shurmur can get the guys rallied. I like the Giants. Seattle at Arizona, I like the Cardinals. Seattle's got a great defense, but last time they faced the Cardinals put up 37 points on them. Carson Palmer threw for over 300 yards and 4 touchdowns. I like the Cardinals. Tampa Bay at Carolina, I think this will be a close game. I think Jameis Winston will put up big numbers, but again, Carolina just a better team. I like the Panthers. San Diego at Denver. I like the Broncos this game. I just think they're a better team than the Chargers are right now. Oakland at Kansas City. I think this will be a close game, but I think Kansas City, again, is just a better team. I think they win. St. Louis at San Francisco. I like the Rams that game. And then Minnesota at Green Bay. I like the Vikings because the Vikings are playing some great ball right now. They're playing great defense. The Packers are in free fall. Even though it's at Lambeau Field, I just think Minnesota is playing better ball. They're a better team right now. I think they win. All right, well, that concludes our podcast for this evening. If you would like to be a guest on the DMV NFL show, please email at executivedirector.fgs@gmail.com and put in the subject line DMV NFL show contestant. That is executivedirector.fgs@gmail.com. Thanks very much and enjoy the games tomorrow.